Hello everyone and welcome to our next lesson. Just a reminder that I originally developed this course for the BANGTAN Academy Discord community, so if you'd like to find out more, please follow them on Twitter at BangtanAcademy_, so you can get access to other materials and make friends to study with. You can also find me on Twitter at writer_court or on thebtseffect.com. Hello and welcome to Learn Korean with BTS Chapter 3. This is going to probably be a longer lecture because for some reason Chapter 3 gives us lots of verbs as well as colors and numbers. So I'm going to do my best to cover all of the information that we are given in Chapter 3, and I will try to give some extra practice and exercises for our supplementary materials instead of giving you additional content for the supplementary materials this time. So yeah, hopefully by the end of this, it will make a lot more sense. So let's get started with page 64. As per usual, there's a little exercise at the top here, which I recommend either pausing the lecture or doing this before or after the lecture. Go ahead and scan that video and complete that first exercise on page 64. I also recommend going back with the language pen to practice what you hear on this page and in the exercises. Just as per usual, go ahead and listen to the native speaker pronunciations. So on the second half of this page, they want you to listen and write down what you hear. So a good exercise is to go ahead and listen to each of these by clicking on the picture and then write down what you hear. And I have listed all of the verbs that they're giving you on this page right here on this slide. And so I will go through them real quickly and tell you what they mean in English. So first we have kada, which is to go. Then we have oda, which is to come. So there are two different words in Korean for that that you will use depending upon different situations. And sometimes these verbs are attached to other verbs that we'll worry about later, but just be aware that sometimes you're going to have to use kada and sometimes you're going to have to use oda, and the difference is just to go and to come or arrive. Under that, we have ikda, which looks like it's spelled differently than it sounds, but in the dictionary form of the verb, you can see it has two ending consonants in that first syllable. And so when you say it, you only pronounce that second one. So ikta for the dictionary form. Underneath that, and that means to read. Underneath that, we have 듣다, which is to listen. And then we have 찾다, which is to find or to look for. In the next column, we have 마시다, which is to drink. And then 만들다, which is to make. And then we have 말하다, which is to speak or say. And then 노래하다, which is to sing. And then 쇼핑하다, which is to shop. So one of the big things we're going to learn in this chapter is how to conjugate verbs. And I know for some people that can be really overwhelming, so definitely just take your time with this chapter and practice conjugating verbs. If it doesn't make sense, then let me know. I can recommend some additional videos or resources. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first key expression on page 66. So I have written it here as a form with blanks in it to hopefully make it a little easier to understand. So basically we have a blank and then we have or 를, which is really hard to say and I still mess it up. So it's okay if you can't say that yet. And then another blank and then ayo or 어요. And so ayo or 어요 is going to be our verb conjugation, and the 을/를 is the object marking particle. So I've written it here in English as to blank a blank, which is kind of just a way to translate what I wrote up above in Korean. So basically that first blank in Korean, in the Korean sentence, it's going to be some sort of object because that's our object marking particle. So some sort of noun needs to go there. And then in the second blank is going to be some sort of verb stem with the io or oyo in the conjugation. So in English, of course, that order is reversed. And so it's basically to verb an object is what this structure is. So it'll make a little more sense when we have some words to fill in those blanks. But first, quick explanation. So and r are the object marking particles. I'm still never going to say those right. It's easy to get tongue-tied on those because of the ryu consonant. So if you're an English speaker, that might be tough at first, but it's okay. Just keep practicing. It'll get a little bit easier. But that is your object marking particle that tells you what the verb is doing to the object. So you'll see that when we add some words in here in a second. But first, the present tense polite verb conjugation is what we're talking about here with the ayo and oyo. So conjugation can get kind of confusing really quickly because there are different types of verbs in Korean. There's also a lot of different types of conjugations. But for right now, we're going to focus only on the present tense conjugation of polite speech. And so basic polite speech, as you know, is yo form, and that is also present tense. And so this ayo and oyo is here because certain verbs will be conjugated with the ayo and certain verbs will be conjugated with the oyo. And so the explanation that I believe they give you this explanation in the text, and it's also an explanation you'll see on various Korean learning websites, is that verbs where the last vowel is a or o will take ayo in their conjugation. So what that means basically is you take a verb that is in dictionary form, which of course has that ta on the end, you take the ta off, and then you would add either ayo or oyo to get polite form present tense. So if the verb has the last vowel that ends in a or o, you're going to put ayo. All other verbs that have different vowels will use oyo. The only exception is, of course, hada verbs. Any verb that ends in hada will always turn into heyo. So let's go ahead and take a look at some actual verbs here to make it a little easier to understand. I'm taking some of this information from page 67 as well as the verbs that we were shown a couple pages ago on page 64. So here are some verbs that are going to use the ayo conjugation. So we can see kada. So kada, we're going to take off the ta because you always take off that dictionary form ta. So take that off and we're left with just ka. And so since we're left with just ka, that is an a. So it's going to take ayo. So you can see I've written here ka with ayo, but we don't actually write it like that. We just write kayo. So the reason that it does this is just it's a shortening, basically. It's just smushing it together. It kind of, there's no need for that extra ah there because there's already the ah from ka. So it's just kayo. And in the next one, oda, we can see you take off the ta and you're left with o, and then you put ayo. So it looks like o ayo, which has been shortened and basically smushed together in Korean to be wayo. So wayo is to come conjugated. Next we have 탔다, which is a lot easier because if you take off that ta, you're just left with tat, and it ends in a consonant, so you add ayo and you just get tajayo. So some people, when they're first starting Korean, might be tempted to say tat ayo, but that's not following pronunciation rules. So when you have a verb like tata, that first syllable is ending in a jiet, so it's a consonant. So that consonant will carry over to the ayo part or the a part because it's just a vowel. So this second syllable in the conjugated verb is a, so that jiet sound gets transferred over to the a. So it's more pronounced like ta da yo. So ta da yo, you say it all together, it carries over. There's no, stop in your speech just because it's spelled tat. So ta da yo. Then the next one looks a lot like hada. So this is hada, which is to buy. So we take the ta off and then add ayo. So we get sa ayo, which gets smushed down to just sayo. And the last one is 보다, which is to look or see. and we get 보아요, which gets smushed to 봐요. So next we're going to look at verbs that use the 어요 form instead. So these are the verbs that don't have a or o as their last verb in the dictionary form. So if we go back and look at these ones, you can see they all have a or o in those dictionary forms. They all have those two vowel sounds, but these don't have those two vowel sounds. They have all the other different vowels. So all of these will take the 어요 form. So first we have 먹다, which is to eat. So you take off the da and you're left with just 먹. So and then you add 어요, so we get 먹어요. And again, it's not 먹어요. You don't cut that sound in the first syllable. The ending consonant there gets pushed over to that vowel in the second syllable. So instead of 먹어요, it's 먹어요. So it flows a little bit more. So 먹어요. Next we have 읽다, 읽다, which is to read. Take off that da, add the 어요, and there are two consonants in this one. So it's a little bit different, but that kiuk, that second consonant there, that sound gets pushed over to the 어요 part. So again, if you read that all together, 읽어요, 읽어요. So you'll notice when you say the verb in its dictionary form, it's 읽다. You're just pronouncing the kiuk sound. So 읽다 for dictionary form, and then 읽어요 for the actual conjugated form. So you pronounce both of the consonants when you read it. Next we have 마시다, which is to drink. And so you cut the da off, you're left with 마시. So we get 마시어요, which ends up being 마셔요. So that verb again squishes down in the middle so that we have 마셔요. Next we have 만들다, cut off the da. This verb means to make. So cut off that da, and then we have 만들, add the 어요, 만들어요. So again, that ending consonant is going to get pushed over to the next vowel because in that next syllable we have that empty consonant. The circle is an empty consonant in this case because if you read just that syllable, it's all, but because it's preceded by a consonant, that sound gets carried over. So it's not 만들어요, it's 만들어요. 만들어요. So the final verb on this slide is a little bit different, and I don't think they tell you this in the textbook. At least I don't remember seeing it in the textbook yet. This is actually an irregular verb. So Korean does have irregular verbs, unfortunately, which makes it way more complicated. But irregular verbs, there are different types, and so this is a digat irregular verb. So that character, like the name of that character is a digat. So it's digat irregular verb. And when you conjugate a digat irregular verb, that digat consonant changes to a ryul consonant. So that's what I've illustrated here on the slide. So because it's being followed by a vowel, it changes to a ryul consonant. So we have 듣다, we cut off the da, and we're left just with a syllable that's 듣. So if we put 어요 to transform this to the present tense conjugation, that digat in the bottom is going to turn into a ryul. So we end up with a word that is pronounced and spelled as 들어요. So I know that's a little confusing, like it's going from 듣다 to 들어요, but it's just something, you learn over time. You will learn different conjugations and different irregular verbs. That just takes practice. It's going to be really confusing for a while, but it's just going to take some time and take some practice and honestly, memorization at first. When I first started learning in the first few Korean, the first like semester of Korean class, honestly, I just would write out different conjugations and memorize them until they made sense. So it's different for everyone. Do what works best for you, but sometimes just writing out a lot of different conjugations, like a lot of different verbs for practice, will help you memorize what the different forms look like. And then you can go back and learn, all the rules later if you want to. So this being a tigat irregular verb might not mean much to you right now, but that's okay. Just remember that 듣다 turns into 들어요, and you'll be good for now. So next we're going to look at the 하다 verbs and their conjugation, which is the easiest of them all because we just changed the 하다 to 해요. It's always going to be the same, no matter what comes in front of the hada part. If it's a hada verb, it's going to be heo when we conjugate it. So we have madhada, which is to speak or say, becomes madheo, madheo. And then we have 노래하다, which becomes 노래해요, 노래해요, which is to sing. And then we have 쇼핑하다, which is to shop, and we end up with 쇼핑해요. So let's go back to page 66 now and look at the key expression, the actual conversation. So we have the first person is saying 무엇을 찾아요, which means what are you looking for? And then person B says 모자요, 모자요. So 모자 is a hat, and it just has the yo form ending to make it polite. So a little bit of explanation here. We first word that we have is the word for what. So 무엇 is how it's spelled. So 무엇, and then the object marking particle is attached to that, and then the verb we have 찾아요 conjugated. So from this noun, this 무엇 is the noun, what is the noun, and it has this object marking particle attached to it, which tells you that the verb is attached to this noun. So it's what are you looking for? That noun 무엇 is the object of 찾아요. So, and then in the response, the person says 모자요. That noun plus 요 is just a polite way to say a simple answer of a noun. You can just tack yo onto the end of it. So you wouldn't just say, you know, if someone says, what are you looking for? You're not just going to say hat in Korean. You're going to say hat plus yo to make it nice, to make it more polite. So the next thing to point out is that this what is what, but you may have heard it in its contracted form, which is mo. So, you know, it sounds more like you're just saying an m and an o sound put together. There is that other vowel sound in there, so it's written, the contraction is written the way I've shown it on this slide, but most people just kind of pronounce it like mo if you're saying what, you know, if you're just asking someone what, question mark. So that's the contracted form. And the way it's written in the book and the way I've written it on this slide as muat, that's the like original longer form of the word that means what. And then 무엇을, which is the word for what plus the object particle that we have in this sentence. You can see the shiat at the end of muat. That shiat sound gets carried over to the sound. So 무엇을 is what it sounds like. And so that's, you know, what plus the object particle, and the contraction there is 뭘. So you might actually see it written as 뭘. And, you know, that's more colloquial, people typing on the internet or just in speech. People might say it like that, but in our textbook, it is written out all the way because that is, you know, technically the correct, like, original form of this word. But I just wanted to let you know that those two contractions do exist, but they are the same thing as, you know, the longer form, just contracted. Okay, so let's move on to the key expression 2, which is on page 68. So the first sentence, person A is saying 모자가 몇 층에 있어요? So they're asking what floor are hats on. So like they're in a store and they're saying, you know, what floor of the store are hats sold on? So there's some extra words, of course, in that explanation, but in the basic sentence, it's just what floor are the hats on? And then person B is answering them and saying that they're on the second floor. So that's 2층에 있어요. 2층에 있어요. So I've written down here this blank with 층. So 층 is floor, like floor of a building, of shopping mall, apartment building, you know, just different levels. So like we would say in English, just first floor, second floor, third floor, or first level, second level, like that. So that's what 층 is. So you put a number in front of 층. And then in the second line here, I've written blank 층에. So that 층에 is a location. It's marking the location, as you can see with this third line here. I've written blank with 에. So 에 is your location marking particle. So this particle is attached to the end of a location. We'll see later on, I'm sure, that this 에 can also be attached to time and date. but here we're talking about like a physical location. So 에 in this example is a place where something exists. So 층에 is, blank. 층에 means something on whatever floor. So in our example, it's 2. So 2층에 on second floor. And then in the fourth line here, I've put, blank에 있어요 or blank에 없어요. So you can put a noun, a place, whether it's, second floor or a specific building like your home or an apartment. You can say that noun plus 에 있어요 or 없어요. So if I want to say, if we're talking about, I don't know, televisions or something, let's say somebody wants to say, they don't have a television in their apartment. So the Korean word for apartment is 아파트. So you would say 아파트에, and we're talking about television. So let's just assume everyone knows we're talking about that. 아파트에 있어요 if you have a television, and if you don't have a television, you would say 아파트에 없어요. So you're using that 에 to mark the location for 아파트 or second floor or whatever we're talking about, the physical location, and then saying something exists there or something does not exist there. So if we go back to what person B is saying, they're saying 2층에 있어요. So there are hats on the second floor. So these are some examples I have taken from page 69. This is basically to show you how we can put different particles and a conjugation in the same sentence. So they are combining in the first example, 보라, which is a person, 카페, which is a cafe, and 있다. So 있다 is, dictionary form for 있어요, for to exist. So if we want to make this into a sentence, we have to add in the particles. So we would say 보라가 카페에 있어요. So what's happening here is you are attaching a subject particle to mark the subject of the verb. So that's 보라. So 보라 gets 가 because it ends in a vowel. So 보라가, and then we're saying where this person is. So 보라 is in the cafe, is 보라가 카페에 있어요. 카페 gets the 에 as the location where something exists. And then, of course, 있다 gets conjugated into 있어요. So in the next example, we have a noun, which is 아미밤, of course, armybam. Then we have a location, which is a convenience store, 편의점, 편의점. And then we have a verb, which is 없다, or to not exist. So if we want to make a sentence out of this and use our particles in our conjugation, we're going to put the subject marking particle with 아미밤, which takes E because it ends in a consonant. So we get 아미밤이. And then the location something is existing or not existing is the 편의점. So we put 에 after that, and then we conjugate 없다 to 없어요. So our full sentence is 아미밤이 편의점에 없어요. So there's not an army bomb at the convenience store, which could mean that, someone has asked if they sell them there, and you're saying no, they don't have army bombs, or someone could be looking for one they left behind or something, and like, no, it's not at the convenience store. So that sentence could mean a couple of different things, but basically what it means is that there's not an army bomb at the convenience store. So then to put those two sentences we just made into context, basically those sentences could be answers to someone's question. So for example, the first one, someone could ask you, 보라가 카페에 있어요? Is Bora at the cafe? And if she is at the cafe, you could say 네 카페에 있어요. And the thing that the textbook is making note of here is that you can often omit whatever topic is going with the 는 particle. So I've written in parentheses here 보라는. So you could answer and say 네 보라는 카페에 있어요, but that does repeat the topic, which is just unnecessary repetition because the person you're speaking to already knows you're talking about Bora, so you don't have to say her name again. So you can just say 네 카페에 있어요. So same thing for the second one. If someone is asking 아미밤이 편의점에 있어요? Is there an army bomb at the convenience store? And you want to say no, you can just say 안녕, 편의점에 없어요. So you can leave out the 밤은 part, which is the topic of the sentence, because that's understood by the person you're speaking to when you're answering them. They're going to know that that's what you're talking about. So it's written out in your textbook so that you can see, the full correct sentence does have this topic in there, but we can leave it out because it's understood. So it's still correct without that part, amipamen or pora는. It's still correct without that in there. It's just that you need to know that that does exist in terms of it's implied because you're answering a direct question about something specific. Okay, moving on to page 70. This is the full conversation for chapter 3. So I'm going to read through it real quick and then we're going to move on to some colors and numbers. 어서 오세요. 무엇을 찾아요? 모자요. 모자가 몇 층에 있어요? 2층에 있어요. 이거 분홍색도 있어요? 여기 있어요. 감사합니다. So basically, this first part is what we've already seen. So we've seen 어서 오세요 before, which is just welcome, come in. And then we see 무엇을 찾아요, which is what are you looking for, that we broke down earlier in the video. Person B answers that they're looking for a hat. And so they're asking what floor the hats are on. And the salesperson says they're on the second floor. And so the second part of the conversation is supposed to occur after they've already gone to the second floor. So person B has gone to the second floor and is basically would be, looking at hats or holding a hat or something. And what they're saying here with 이거 분홍색도 있어요, they're asking, do you also have this in pink? Because 분홍색 is pink and that 도 right there is the particle that means also or to. So they're asking if the store also has this particular item in pink, and we can assume it's a hat. I don't think they show us any pictures. No, there aren't any pictures on this page, at least, that would show her holding the hat, but she would either be pointing to a hat or holding a hat and saying, do you also have this in pink? And then the salesperson can say, 여기 있어요, for it's right here. They can either point it out to the person, or they can be holding an item and saying it's right here. And then, of course, person B just says thank you. So they're showing us this conversation right before going into colors, but I just wanted to explain that that's what that means in the second part of the conversation. It's basically asking for something in a different color, which you could also do in different sizes or different whatever you happen to be looking at. Of course, we're dealing with colors here. So the word for color is 색깔. So that's where this 색 comes from after 분홍. So 분홍색 is pink. Every color pretty much ends in 색. So 색깔 is color. And we're going to go ahead and move on to that, which is also on page 70. So 색깔 are colors, and the ones that they give us, of course, are limited, but it's plenty for right now. We can learn more colors later, but these are some basic colors to get you started. And of course, in the book, they show you the actual color with the Korean word. So that makes it really easy to know what color is what. So I'm going to go through these real quick. 검은색 is black, 하얀색, white, 빨간색, red, 분홍색, pink, 주황색, orange, 노란색, yellow, 초록색, green, 하늘색 is like a light sky blue, 파랑색 is like a darker, like more blue, deeper blue, and 보라색, purple. So something else they also give us in this chapter are numbers. I talked a little bit about numbers in, I think it was one of the previous supplementary sections, but we'll go over it here as well. So numbers are 숫자. So the page 70 has these listed out. I recommend, clicking on that little play button and listening to the pronunciation. So these are Sino-Korean numbers. They are taken from the Chinese characters. Korean has two number systems, and which number you use depends on what you're counting or what you're talking about. That's not something I recommend you worry about right now because it does get confusing, and it will come, with time and just remembering what types of numbers go with what. So these are Sino-Korean numbers, and this first row here is 1 through 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's 1 through 10, with 10 being 10. And so then if we want to move on to 11 to 20, you can see we take the word for 10 and then just add the words for the other numerals after it. So 11 is just the word for 10 and the word for 1. So 11, 12 is 12, 13 is 13, 14, 14, 15, 15. And then we get to 16, and you can see here I have written ship and yuk, but you can see in brackets I have put shimyuk. So shimyuk is actually the pronunciation, but it's spelled the way it's written on the left. So it's spelled as ship and then yuk, but it's pronounced shimyuk. Don't ask me why, I don't know. That's just it's just pronunciation rules, and some things are not always pronounced the way they are written, much like in English, it's not always, doesn't always sound like what it looks like. So just remember that 16 is written like ship and yuk, but pronounced shimyuk. 17 is 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, and then 20, e-ship. So for 20, we can see we take the word for 2, which is e, and put it before the word for 10, which is ship. So it would be the same if you want to say 30, just replace e with sam. So 30 is 30, 40, 40, like that. So that is the method for, these numbers up until 100. So you can see 100 here is 100, and then 1,000 is ton, and 10,000 is man. We won't really need to worry about numbers quite that high right now, but when you learn about money, you'll definitely want to know, pick ton and man. But that's something that's not quite as important right now. What's more important is learning lower numbers, because that's probably what we're going to use the most for now. So that's actually it for chapter 3. I know this was probably a long one. I messed up a lot, so I'm going to have a lot of editing to do. But this is probably a longer lecture, so definitely, take it in bits if you need to and follow along in your book. I will list, of course, the exercises in the book as part of your homework assignment. And for the supplementary section, I think I'm going to try to just give you more practice with like numbers and colors and verb conjugations, instead of giving you, a bunch of new words or anything like that. I might work in a few new words and try to give you some conversations related, to the BTS members speaking, but we're going to focus on verb conjugations and numbers, and colors, because I know that is a lot of new information, and I know it's different for everyone. So some people pick up on that really quickly, and other people need more time to practice and process. So yeah, that's it for chapter 3, and I will see you in the supplementary.